It was supposed to be just another routine flight from New York to Los Angeles. Passengers settling in, flight attendants going through their regular pre-flight checks. But in the high-stakes world of aviation, even the smallest error can spiral into catastrophe. What happens when a seasoned flight attendant, someone trained to keep you safe, makes one critical mistake that puts everyone's lives at risk? In the next few minutes, you'll witness how a simple oversight turned into a nightmare at 35,000 feet. The decision that followed would leave aviation experts stunned and passengers forever changed. Nobody on board Flight 2703 knew that their lives hung in the balance because of something so easily preventable. The shocking turn of events that followed defies everything we trust about air travel safety. Have you ever experienced something terrifying on a flight? Something that made you question if you'd make it home? Share your story in the comments. But first, buckle up. This true story of aviation disaster narrowly averted will make your heart race. Flight 2703 from JFK to LAX was packed to capacity that crisp October morning. Business travelers typed furiously on laptops. Families settled restless children, and first-time flyers gripped their armrests as the engines roared to life. Among them sat Dr. Marcus Chen, a neurosurgeon rushing to perform an emergency procedure in Los Angeles, Emma Wallace, a mother cradling her 4-month-old son on his first flight, and Captain James Reeves, an off-duty pilot heading home after 3 consecutive international routes. At the front of the cabin stood Vanessa Morgan, a flight attendant with 12 years of experience. Known for her efficiency and charm, Vanessa had worked for Transcontinental Airways for most of her career. Her colleagues respected her ability to handle difficult passengers with ease and complete pre-flight checks in record time. But today, something was off. Good morning. This is your lead flight attendant, Vanessa. We're expecting the smooth journey to Los Angeles today, with an estimated flight time of 5 hours and 42 minutes, she announced, her voice betraying a slight tremor. What passengers couldn't know was that Vanessa had received devastating news just minutes before reporting for duty. Her mother had been hospitalized after a severe stroke. The airline was short-staffed, and finding a replacement would have delayed the flight significantly. Against better judgment, she decided to work. As Captain Reynolds completed the final system checks, Vanessa rushed through her pre-flight safety inspection. Her mind elsewhere, she glanced at the emergency equipment without truly seeing it. When her colleague Carlos asked if she'd verify the oxygen system, she nodded automatically, having barely registered the question. Meanwhile, Emma Wallace noticed Vanessa's distraction as she demonstrated the safety procedures. "Is everything okay with the plane?" she whispered to Captain Reeves seated beside her. "I'm sure it's fine," he reassured her, though his trained eye had caught Vanessa fumbling with the emergency instruction cards, placing them in wrong seat pockets. As the aircraft began taxiing, Vanessa's supervisor radioed from the terminal. "Vanessa, did you complete the secondary check on row 17's emergency exit mechanisms?" "Affirmative," she responded, though in truth, she couldn't remember if she had. The plane accelerated down the runway, lifting into the cloudless blue sky. Passengers settled in, unaware that a critical safety protocol had been overlooked, a mistake that would soon turn their routine journey into a fight for survival. Would you feel comfortable if you noticed your flight attendant seemed distracted during safety procedures? Let us know in the comments. An hour into the flight, the aircraft encountered mild turbulence as it passed over the Midwest. Captain Reynolds' voice crackled through the intercom, advising passengers to remain seated with seatbelts fastened. For most travelers, this was routine, a brief disruption to an otherwise uneventful journey. Vanessa moved through the cabin, checking seatbelts with mechanical precision. Her thoughts remained split between her duties and her hospitalized mother. When she reached row 17, the emergency exit row she had failed to properly inspect, she paused. Something didn't look right about the door seal, but passengers were watching, waiting for her to move on. She hesitated, then continued down the aisle. "Excuse me," called Dr. Chen from his seat. "Is that normal?" He pointed toward a small section near the emergency exit where a rubber seal appeared slightly displaced. "It's nothing to worry about," Vanessa assured him with a practiced smile. "Just cosmetic." But Captain Reeves, observing from several rows back, narrowed his eyes. His decades of experience told him otherwise. He unclipped his seatbelt and made his way toward Vanessa. "I believe that seal requires immediate attention," he said quietly. Vanessa's face flushed. "Sir, I need you to return to your seat during turbulence." "I'm Captain James Reeves, Transcontinental. That's a pressure seal issue." Before Vanessa could respond, a sudden drop in cabin pressure caused ears to pop throughout the aircraft. Oxygen masks deployed from overhead compartments, except in rows 15 through 19, where Vanessa had failed to reset the system after a routine maintenance check. Passengers gasped as the aircraft shuddered. Emma clutched her infant son tightly to her chest, desperately trying to figure out how to secure an oxygen mask on both of them. Dr. Chen immediately reached up, confused to find no mask had dropped for him. "Mom, I can't breathe," a young boy cried out in row 16. The cabin erupted in panic. Vanessa froze momentarily, the weight of her mistake crashing down on her. Carlos rushed past her, grabbing the emergency phone to alert the cockpit. "Partial oxygen system failure in mid-cabin," he reported urgently. "Sections E and F are without masks." In the cockpit, First Officer Martinez initiated emergency protocols. "Mayday, Mayday. This is Transcontinental 2703 declaring an emergency. We have a cabin pressure issue and partial oxygen system failure." As the plane rapidly descended to reach breathable altitude, Vanessa finally snapped into action. She hurried to the storage compartment, retrieving portable oxygen bottles. Her hands trembled as she distributed them to passengers without masks. "What's happening?" demanded a businessman, his face contorted with fear. "Please remain calm," Vanessa instructed, her voice steadier than she felt. "We're experiencing a minor pressurization issue. The pilots are bringing us to a lower altitude." But Captain Reeves knew better. He approached the emergency exit door, now visibly compromised. A thin stream of condensation had formed around its edges, evidence of the growing pressure differential. "This exit needs reinforcement," he told Vanessa firmly. "The seal is failing." Vanessa's negligence had created a perfect storm. A weakened exit door seal combined with a disabled emergency oxygen system in the surrounding rows. If the seal failed completely at this altitude, the rapid decompression would be catastrophic. Carlos returned with duct tape and blankets. "It's the best we have," he said grimly. Meanwhile, Emma's baby had begun turning slightly blue around the lips. Dr. Chen noticed immediately and rushed to her side, ignoring flight protocols. "He needs oxygen now," he shouted. Vanessa handed him a portable oxygen bottle with shaking hands. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. The aircraft continued its rapid descent, dropping thousands of feet per minute. Passengers clutched armrests, prayed, or sat in stunned silence. A teenager filmed the chaos on his phone. In the cockpit, Captain Reynolds received troubling news from air traffic control. The nearest airport was experiencing severe thunderstorms, making an emergency landing there extremely dangerous. The alternative was attempting to reach Denver, but that meant 20 more minutes in a compromised aircraft. "We need to make a decision now," First Officer Martinez urged, eyeing the warning lights flashing across the control panel. Back in the cabin, Captain Reeves and Carlos worked frantically to reinforce the exit door, while Dr. Chen moved between affected passengers, prioritizing those showing signs of hypoxia. Vanessa stood in the aisle, watching the situation deteriorate around her, the magnitude of her mistake now unmistakable. The intercom crackled. "Cabin crew, prepare for emergency landing. If you are on this flight, would you try to help the crew or focus on protecting yourself and your loved ones? Share your thoughts in the comments." "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reynolds speaking. We're initiating an emergency descent to Denver International Airport. Please remain in your seats with seatbelts fastened." His voice remained steady, betraying none of the chaos unfolding on the flight deck. The aircraft banked sharply left, descending through turbulent air. Oxygen masks swung wildly from the ceiling in the sections where they had deployed. Passengers clutched them to their faces, eyes wide with terror. In row 17, Captain Reeves and Carlos continued reinforcing the compromised exit door with blankets and tape, a desperate, temporary solution. The seal was deteriorating rapidly, the thin stream of condensation now forming a visible frost pattern around the edges. "This won't hold for 20 minutes, Reeves muttered. "The structural integrity is failing." Vanessa stood frozen in the aisle, watching her career and the lives of 213 passengers hanging in the balance. A sudden jolt of turbulence snapped her back to reality. Her training finally kicked in through the fog of guilt and fear. "Carlos, we need to relocate passengers away from this section," she commanded, her voice finding new authority. "Prepare rows 10 through 14 for additional seating." As they began moving passengers away from the danger zone, Dr. Chen continued administering portable oxygen to those showing signs of hypoxia, prioritizing the elderly and children. Emma's baby had regained some color, but now several other passengers were displaying alarming symptoms. "We're losing oxygen bottles too quickly," Dr. Chen warned. "At this rate, we have maybe 10 minutes of supplemental oxygen left." In the cockpit, First Officer Martinez received more troubling news. Denver is reporting crosswinds at 35 knots, approaching their safety limits for landing. Captain Reynolds faced an impossible choice: risk a dangerous landing in Denver or continue to a more distant airport with better conditions, potentially running out of oxygen and risking catastrophic decompression. He radioed air traffic control. "Request emergency priority clearance for Denver, runway 16R, and all emergency services on standby." Back in the cabin, a sudden violent shudder ran through the aircraft. A hairline crack appeared at the corner of the compromised exit door. "Everyone move now," Captain Reeves shouted, abandoning any pretense of calm. Passengers scrambled away from the exit row as the crack expanded, the pressure differential threatening to tear the door from its frame. The cabin altitude warning blared, indicating dangerous pressure levels. Vanessa made a split-second decision. She grabbed the emergency kit from under the flight attendant's station and extracted a portable decompression curtain, a piece of equipment she trained with but never expected to use. With Carlos's help, she began securing it across the cabin, effectively dividing the aircraft into 2 sections. "What are you doing?" a passenger screamed. "Creating a pressure zone," she explained breathlessly. "If the door fails, this curtain will slow decompression long enough for the pilots to get us to a safe altitude." Captain Reeves understood immediately. Everyone behind the curtain now. As passengers rushed to comply, the crack on the door expanded further. The sounds of straining metal filled the cabin. Dr. Chen approached Vanessa with a grave expression. "The portable oxygen is almost depleted. 3 passengers in severe respiratory distress." In that moment, Vanessa faced the weight of her mistake fully. Her negligence during the safety check had disabled the emergency oxygen system in these rows. Now lives were at stake. She made another decision. "I need to access the supplemental oxygen manifold under the floor. I can manually redirect oxygen flow to the affected sections." "That's extremely dangerous during flight," Carlos protested. "The manual specifically prohibits." "I know what I did," Vanessa cut him off, "and I'm the only one who can fix it." Meanwhile, Captain Reynolds received the final approach clearance for Denver. "Cabin crew, prepare for emergency landing in 8 minutes." Vanessa knelt on the floor, removing the access panel to the oxygen distribution system. The space below was barely large enough for her to squeeze through. "If you can redirect the oxygen," Captain Reeves said, "it needs to happen before we descend below 10,000 feet, or it won't matter." "I understand," she replied, slipping into the cramped maintenance space with a flashlight between her teeth. Inside the dark, confined compartment, Vanessa navigated the complex network of tubes and valves that regulated the aircraft's oxygen supply. Her hands moved with newfound precision, her earlier distraction replaced by intense focus. She located the master distribution valve that had been improperly reset during her negligent pre-flight check. Above her, the situation continued deteriorating. The crack on the exit door had expanded to nearly 6 inches. The decompression curtain billowed ominously. Dr. Chen was now performing CPR on an elderly man who had lost consciousness. Captain Reynolds' voice came over the intercom again. "Brace for possible rapid decompression. We are 6 minutes from landing." Vanessa located the override switch and hesitated for just a moment. Manually rerouting oxygen during flight was a prohibited procedure for good reason. It risked creating a spark in an oxygen-rich environment. But doing nothing meant certain tragedy. She said a silent prayer and turned the valve. Do you think quick thinking or strict adherence to protocol is more important in emergencies? Let us know your take in the comments. A sudden hiss filled the cabin as oxygen began flowing through the previously disabled vents. Masks in rows 15 through 19 finally dropped from their compartments, bringing desperate relief to the struggling passengers. Dr. Chen quickly secured one over the elderly man's face, continuing chest compressions until he detected a stronger pulse. She did it, Carlos whispered, staring at the floor where Vanessa had disappeared. The aircraft continued its rapid descent toward Denver, now just 4 minutes from touchdown. In the cockpit, warning lights flashed as Captain Reynolds and First Officer Martinez fought to maintain control in the severe crosswinds. Structural integrity compromised in mid-cabin, Martinez reported. Pressure differential still critical. Reynolds gripped the controls tighter. We'll get her down. The cracked emergency exit door continued to deteriorate, the makeshift reinforcements barely holding. Captain Reeves and several passengers pressed against the decompression curtain, using their body weight to support it against the increasing pressure differential. Just a few more minutes, Reeves encouraged them. Stay together. Below the cabin floor, Vanessa crawled through the narrow maintenance space toward the exit point. Her job was done. Oxygen was flowing, but the compartment had become a death trap as the aircraft's frame flexed under stress. A sudden lurch sent her crashing against a metal strut, slicing open her forehead. Bleeding and disoriented, she reached the access panel just as the pilot's voice announced, "Brace for landing. Heads down, stay down." The runway lights of Denver International appeared through the windows. The aircraft descended through the final 1,000 feet, buffeted by vicious crosswinds that sent it swaying from side to side. Passengers gripped their seats in terror. Emma held her baby against her chest, her body curled protectively around him. Dr. Chen continued working on his patient despite the turbulence. With a screeching of tires and the roar of reverse thrusters, Flight 2703 touched down hard on runway 16R. The impact caused the weakened exit door to flex inward another inch, but it held. The decompression curtain bulged dramatically but didn't tear. "Keep braking. Keep braking," Martinez urged as they fought to slow the massive aircraft. As the plane finally rolled to a stop, emergency vehicles swarmed the tarmac, their lights painting the cabin in flashes of red and blue. The relief in the cabin was palpable. Sobs, prayers, and stunned silence mingled in the aftermath of near disaster. Carlos pried open the floor access panel. "Vanessa?" She emerged, bloodied but alive. To the sight of passengers she had nearly doomed, and then saved. No words were exchanged as emergency personnel boarded the aircraft and began evacuation procedures. The elderly man Dr. Chen had been treating was first to be removed on a stretcher, now breathing steadily. 3 months later, Vanessa sat before the National Transportation Safety Board inquiry. Her career as a flight attendant was over. She had voluntarily surrendered her certification. But the testimony of passengers, especially Captain Reeves and Dr. Chen, had saved her from criminal charges. Ms. Morgan's negligence created the emergency, Captain Reeves testified, but her extraordinary actions afterward saved 213 lives, including my own. She chose to enter a potentially lethal situation to correct her mistake. As Vanessa left the hearing room, she found Emma and her baby waiting in the hallway. "I've wanted to thank you," Emma said quietly, "not for nearly killing us." She managed a small smile. "But for showing my son what true courage looks like. Owning your mistakes and doing whatever it takes to make them right." Vanessa knelt down, looking at the healthy baby boy who had nearly been one of her victims. "I'll spend the rest of my life making sure nothing like this happens again," she promised. "I'm working with the airline to overhaul safety training." The story of Flight 2703 would be studied by aviation professionals for years to come. A sobering reminder that in the high-stakes world of air travel, a moment's distraction can lead to disaster, and that heroism sometimes means facing the consequences of your own failures. What lessons do you think flight crews and passengers should take from this incident? Tell us in the comments. The story of Flight 2703 reminds us that even the most experienced professionals can make life-altering mistakes, and that true character isn't revealed in our perfection, but in how we respond when we fail. What did you think of this incredible story? Was Vanessa ultimately a hero or a villain in your eyes? We'd love to hear your perspective in the comments section below. Many of us fly regularly, trusting our lives to the professionals who operate and maintain these incredible machines. Have you ever witnessed a close call during air travel or noticed something concerning about safety procedures? Share your experiences. Your story might help others stay vigilant on future flights. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, you're going to want to see what happens next week when we cover the shocking case of an air traffic controller who spotted something unusual on their radar that saved hundreds of lives. Subscribe now and hit that notification bell so you don't miss it. For those of you wondering about the real-world implications of this story, we've included links in the description to actual aviation safety protocols and what passengers should know before boarding any flight. Knowledge is your best defense in emergency situations. Aviation experts among our viewers, we'd especially value your insights on this incident. What additional safety measures could prevent such mistakes? Is there a systemic issue that needs addressing in commercial aviation? This video is part of our split-second decision series, where we explore moments when everything hangs in the balance. If you missed our previous episodes, check out the playlist linked on screen now. Remember, behind every flight is a team of human beings, fallible like all of us, but trained to handle extraordinary situations. Next time you fly, take a moment to truly listen to those safety instructions. They might just save your life. And if you found value in this story, help us spread awareness by hitting that like button and sharing this video with friends and family who travel. Together, we can ensure that stories like Flight 2703 serve as lessons that make air travel safer for everyone. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the skies again next week.